no better way to start. Yeah, we are recording the webinar. So if you want to share this with your team after the fact or watch it again in all its glory and just remember all the fun we had, we'll send it out to everybody after the fact. Probably no better way to kick off a webinar than with a little cat joke, which is to say, for those of you that have cats, the question is, why are they always sitting on top of your computer? You know, when you're like trying to work and they come and they sit right on top of the computer, why is that? And of course, the answer is because they want to keep an eye on the mouse. Because it's right there. It just stays there the whole
Good
time.
one. Good one.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Andrew, before it started, we were like, we should look up some cat jokes, you know. And then he said, well, what tool would you use for that, right? GPT, or would you use Claude? Which obviously was the answer. So Andrew's kind of gotten the win for the day. Um, yeah, what do cats do or say when they're surprised? You've got to be kidding me. Okay, we should dig in. So
Thank you.
today's webinar, those were the highlights. Thank you for being here. We're really talking a lot about workflow, but more than workload, we're talking about waiting. So, right, all these W words, but a lot of what we find that we're doing as bookkeepers and accountants, and in our case, as an app vendor that serves them, is realizing that you can really optimize a lot of workflow, but sometimes you're just waiting for information. So I'm curious from your perspective, Helina, do you find that, and we're going to do a poll for everybody to answer this, but do you find that you're slowed down in terms of your workflow most by waiting on clients for something you need from them or waiting on approvals, right, to make sure they
Mm.
get to you so they're fully approved, or maybe some of both?
It's a little both. It depends on the client. So for ones that have more complicated approval processes, you usually find if it's just the business owner waiting for approvals on, it can be pretty quick. And I hate chasing clients for things. I'll just say that out of the gate here. I don't like email communication because I have too many of them in a day. And so the default chasing a client for emails and by email for things is just it's up there with my hatred for checks. So we've we've tried to put structures in place at Entreflow to help minimize that pain with quick meetings every other week or every week or set schedules where they're doing all the approvals at once or something like that. But where the approvals get bad is when we have a larger organization where there's lots of different managers that we have to chase and they don't understand the impact of leaving something hanging for a while, and how that impacts the books and getting closed. So those are fun, challenging nuggets to the cats to herd, I suppose you could say. And then on the chasing documents, yeah, I also don't love that. We also use those weekly meetings with a lot of our bigger clients to just get the information that we need from them if we haven't figured out ways to get it automatically already. Because it's such a time suck, and it's also a time suck for our clients too. We need to we try our best to try to figure out how to get the data from them as automated as possible because they've got to grow their businesses, and do other, important things rather than chase receipts or look for receipts themselves. So we try to
Right.
find ways to make it easy for them because we find if we focus on making it easy for them, it ends up being easier for us through the process. So
Love it. Andrew, do you want to launch the poll and everyone can weigh in on their side? There we go. It's the slowdown poll. So you can choose one, two, or both, because sometimes
yeah.
it is both. Oh, look, it says host and panelists can't vote, so I'm gonna have to sit this one out. We'll have to wait for you all to respond.
Well, you already got my answer, so I won't
Okay,
vote
cool.
again.
I like the answers in the chat too. Thanks, Janine. That makes me laugh. Three cats, one on husband, two on kids.
I was curious about how you go about getting an on-husband and two on kids because I've got that problem at the moment.
I like it. And Jane, welcome to the webinar. It's good to see you again. You had to rent an office because of my cats. Yeah, totally. Sometimes we need to get out of the house, let the cats relax a little bit so we can get some work done. Hmm.
Okay, waiting on clients.
All right, and some both. It happens.
82%, yeah.
So I guess it's a good jumping off point, and I don't know, right, if it's a kind of a back of the napkin estimate or if you've ever attempted to track, sort of time and time value of money, but if you have a sense of sort of like, pre some of the tools that you use now and even now, right, with
Mhm.
tooling, kind of how much time would you spend doing that proverbial cat herding, which of course I love the phrase, and we were gratified that when we launched our application Uncat, a bunch of people were like, "Oh man, I feel like I'm constantly herding cats," and I was like, "This is perfect. This
As
is going to
a
be our new
cat
slogan."
person, I
Right?
love it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, it probably depends on the size of the client, but like easily 10% of our time on a client could be spent wasted, sorry, chasing documents that we need, or questions on expenses. I mean, a lot of the transactions going through the books are pretty recurring, but there's always the random things that come up. A lot more credit card fraud too. So we have to be careful that we're getting all the backup documents for everything in case there's been fraud going through the cards and what have you. So we strive to have, we strive for 100% documentation on every transaction. We're not going to get that, obviously, but
Right.
we try to get at least everything over $100, as a bare minimum. And yeah, there's probably about 10% of the time just chasing either questions or data that we need, especially with a newer client until we kind of whip them into shape. And then, as they grow with us, they get better at giving us the information ahead of time, as opposed to us
Yeah.
having to waste a lot of our meeting time just going through, administrative stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of times, and we've been to many conferences together. And in fact, Helena gave me some amazing cookies from Canada a couple of years ago that we still talk about now. So I'm like excited for whenever the next conference is, and I'm hoping to get some more Canadian cookies. They were good.
Okay.
As I recall, there's some maple in there. That's
There was
key.
there was a lot of maple in those cookies.
That's key. You know it's Canadian cookie when there's maple in it. But we'll talk with some bookkeepers and accountants at conferences that are like, well, I have some clients that I've worked with for 20 years. So we understand each other. We know everything that client does before they even do it, right? There's not a lot of questions. It's easy to close the books each month. And we're like, that's fantastic. And then there's others where it's like we're in a rhythm, right? Like we know 80% of it. We've
Yeah.
created some bank rules to sort of intercept so we don't even have to manually categorize a lot of these transactions, for example, or chase them for receipts because we get it. We've got some processes. And
Yeah.
there's some tools out there, right, where if they have particular types of charge cards that you can preemptively say, oh, I'm buying something right now and it's for this. And that way it flows in and you don't have to ask the question after the fact. But for those that do land in the ledger and you're like, "Oh, I don't know what this is. Any themes? Is it because of the source? Is it because of the vendor where it's like it's Amazon 6 million SKUs? I don't know. Or is it the nature
Mm.
of a particular client where it's like normally we would know what a TV is for, but this client buys TVs for themselves, for their company as giveaways, for marketing, for conferences. So it's the same TV, but you could treat it 10 different ways.
I mean, it's always like travel's always a fun one. So there are
Oh,
clients that go to conferences. Obviously, there's a bunch of random stuff that comes up. It's always really exciting when they go to countries that are not English speaking and they send us receipts and we can't read them anyhow. But we do our best. But yeah, just trying to figure out what things are. Obviously, it's easy to Google things to try to do our best. But if there's tips and things like that, I mean, you split out. That's always fun chasing for. Hotel receipts are awesome because you don't know until you get the bill if there was meals or not, right? It could be a whole gamut of things on a hotel bill. It could be a room booking if they're organizing meetings with potential customers or something like that, and then their hotel room, and then meals, and la 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 la. So when they have those one-off events, they're usually really busy right before they go, and then really busy as soon as they get back. And so it's tricky to try to track those down quickly, but you have to be diligent about that because it could go into many different buckets. Then there's some like vendors that are tricky. Like um, we try to get access to our clients' accounts as much as possible so that we can just go get stuff ourselves. Try to get access to their bank accounts. So we can get the statements. Try to get access to their Home Depot or whatever other kind of accounts where they've
yeah.
got regular things happening. That can be tricky with like AWS where you can't really add other users and other kinds of accounts where it's harder to add users. So there's definitely culprits across all of our clients where it's always the same kind of vendors where we can't get what we need very easily. But we just have to put mechanisms in place, reminders and what have you, or use the time in person to say, hey, we're doing this now, just give it to me now. And we don't have to talk about it again. Just to make it easy for us to get get what we need. A lot of our clients are high growth, and so they're, probably going to have some kind of investor conversations at some point in time, or maybe an acquisition. And so, when we have to kind of operate as if there's a due diligence around the corner, and so people really, or maybe an audit, depending on
Right.
what's going on. And so we try to get as much documentation as possible, and it's always the things that are always a little bit more unusual that are harder to get the receipts for. So it's Murphy's law, right? So it's, you're creating that relationship at the start, where and being clear about the expectations and the reason why it's so important, is helpful to kind of rein them in at the start, so that you don't have a client that's just completely uncompliant and you have no idea really what's going on, and can't get things from them easily.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. That's a great kind of preemptive answer because it's always good to ask the question, like just because something can be solved or optimized, is the juice worth the squeeze, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is it important to get these answers back, right? Why not just put them in a drawer called uncategorized and just let
Leave them
them
there.
be there, right? But your example
Yeah,
of this client might get bought someday and we need to be able to move quickly if that opportunity arises. We're trying to preempt audits or be able to answer them quickly and resolve them before they get wild for the client and become
yeah,
troublesome. Obviously, file taxes properly, be able to do reporting and provide some level of insight would be the other one that comes up all the time, where it's like, well, if everything's in the same bucket, you're not really learning anything about, how your
exactly.
cash is flowing.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
no, that makes sense.
One thing about our business, because we do fractional CFO work, we're meeting with all of our clients to go over their financials, their forecasts, and everything on a monthly basis. So we've got a really tight deadline, and so that's, I think, a little bit unique compared to some firms out there. But we find that, you mentioned the uncategorized account. If we throw things into uncategorized accounts where we know we absolutely need receipts for it, and you only need to go to one financial management meeting where you're looking at the financial statements and you see a big amount of cash sitting in the uncategorized account for them to realize, oh, okay, yeah, this is a problem, we need to deal with this, and this is the impact of it, right? So it's one of our other tactics, is to just let it be for one meeting and see what happens if we can't get what we need from them.
I think that was one of the ways we got one of our first customers was at a QuickBooks conference, and someone saw the booth and said, "So will this app help me not have $1 million in the uncategorized account for my client?" And I was like, "That's exactly why
A
we're here."
million
Yeah,
dollars.
which sounds hyperbolic, but we've seen it many times, right? Like if you're working with a real estate client or a
Yeah,
construction client, and then it's like, cool, they bought a big truck or a Caterpillar for a couple 100,000. It's like, yeah, we don't know what that was for. We need some information back from the client. So we see it happen all the time. Um, Kind of a good wrap-up question on the waiting on clients, right? Which goes to like what's worked for you, but I'll frame it with the question that Susan posted to Q&A, which is like, how long would you hold on to a client if you've reminded them multiple emails, we need updates. Hey, can you respond to the Google spreadsheets? Can I get a reply to my email or text message if they're not getting you the information that you need to be able to do the job that they've hired you to do? How long do you
yeah,
hold on to them, and or yeah, what tools or strategies have you used to retain those
for
clients, right?
sure.
Get them, whip them into shape, as you said before.
Yeah. So the irony of my life, with my surname, is I really don't have a lot of patience for clients and their bad behaviors. And at the same time, we have a lot of neurodiversity in our family, and done a lot of research in that space. And entrepreneurs have off the charts rates for ADHD, and even worse for us, dyslexia. And so, if you understand that, you'll know that sending a big long email with a whole bunch of text in it and spreadsheets with a whole lot of numbers in it can be very difficult for your clients to wrap their heads around. And so, we try to avoid sending emails and spreadsheets. Yeah, welcome to the club, Jane. Um, we try to avoid sending emails with data and spreadsheets. Like, they're not accountants at the end of the day, so we can't operate with our clients as if their brains work like our weird accounting brains do. Okay. And so I coined a term about a decade ago called Excelitis. Like, when a client opens up an Excel spreadsheet and they're like, And I've watched clients like not be able to toggle from one tab to another in an Excel spreadsheet, and just like pulling my hair out. And I forget that this is just so commonplace for us, but it's really not for a lot of people. And so, that's why, and that's not to give a plug to Brandon here, but something like Uncat is really, maybe it is a plug for Brandon, is really helpful
Sure,
because
we'll
it
take
works
it.
with, the way that people's brains work on the receiving side a little bit better than our accounting brains. Where you're clicking a link in a text message, and then it's there, and then they could just enter in the data that they need to or upload a receipt. That works a little bit better for them than having a spreadsheet where they got to go in there and type some information in or respond to a whole bunch of emails. So, with our clients, if they're on Slack, we'll do a joint Slack channel with them because we find that they respond to Slack way better than they do to emails. And like I said, I just found that the amount of time wasted, and maybe I think it must have been more than, to answer your question before, Brandon, it had to have been more than 10% of our time wasted chasing clients before. And we just kind of got into this process of having these like weekly meetings or weekly working sessions with our larger clients. If they're smaller clients, it's maybe one a month or something like that, where we just, you know, corner them on a call and just get the things that we need in a one big working session was way more effective. And that half an hour that we were spending on that call with them to get everything we needed and go through questions and get it and also build the relationship was way more valuable and less time than sending them emails and getting frustrated and then talking to everyone about how frustrated we were and then sending another email and then still frustrated and we're still not getting what we needed. And so
Right.
it really depends on your client and how their brains work. But like during our onboarding process, we actually spend time to say like, what's the best way to communicate with you? Like, are you a text message kind of person? Are you on WhatsApp? Like, is Slack better for you? Like, and some of our clients are like, yes, just send me a spreadsheet. My brain works that way, and that's great. And we can do that. And our team just has to be a little bit more flexible. But we found that our team being more flexible is like massive time saving for us versus the alternative of us trying to drive everybody down one single plan and having a load of frustration. So
Right.
as far as the time goes, I don't know. Like I think I can handle like 2 months of that. And then I'm like, we need to have a hard conversation. And I've done that with some clients where I've sat down and said, look, we're not getting what we need. We're spending a whole bunch of time chasing you. So if you can't get on top of this, we're increasing your rate by a ridiculous amount next month and get your act together here. Or we're going to say goodbye, or we're going to have to increase your rate for the amount of time wasted. So you
Right.
decide. And it's up to them then. Like, do you want to work with us? This is how it works here. And we also, at the sales process, um, you really need to set up the relationship, um, not from a perspective of, you know, people pleasing perspective where like we're great to work with and everything's going to be perfect because it's not going to be perfect, but we're going to be difficult to work with because they're going to force you into new processes and you're going to have to go along with the program because that's how we work here. And
Yeah.
but we're doing this because it's what's best for your business so that we can actually help you properly and spend more time actually helping you with growing your business and making better decisions for your business and less time on this stupid administrative stuff that's have no value to you at the end of the day. And so just having those kind of harder conversations with them at the sales process so that they are signing up for the tough love. Then when you have to come in with the tough love, they already know, hey, this is the tough love kind of environment. So I got to get on with it and then either leave or pay more money, So I don't know if that helps. That was probably a little bit more long-winded that you're hoping for there, but hope
No,
that
yeah, I
helps
think
with
it's
some
perfect. Also,
strategies.
just because it's like, I mean, every client is different, but from a sort of a global view across your firm and all the other firm owners that you know, it's like let's meet clients where they are, right?
Yeah.
Like, and also, I mean, from our perspective, you mentioned Uncat, and sort of the thesis that we came in with is like we don't want to build software where the bookkeeper or the client spends much time in it.
Yeah.
Like just come in here, get work done, then go do the important thing, which is grow your respective businesses. So it's not designed to be a particularly sticky app. It's designed to be something where you come in and use it and then leave.
Well, and the
So that
goal is
you
that you
can,
don't actually have to use it, right?
right. You're right. Yes. Yeah. As with many
But
problems, it's like
unfortunately, we always do.
yeah, you want it to become obsolete one day where it's like there's nothing unknown. That becomes challenging in a human endeavor, but yes.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
No, that's perfect. I mean, I think that's a pretty good wrap on the waiting for clients. Obviously, several folks marked, hey, both is challenging, right? Waiting on
Yeah.
clients, but also waiting on approvers. The approver typically being a member of the client side team, manager, a director, a founder, a CEO. And so when it comes to waiting on approvers, one obvious bottleneck is the sign off, but where does spend in your experience get stuck? Like
It's
what
stuck.
why is
Yeah.
there a problem here and how do we then go about addressing it?
For sure. Like I mentioned, like with some of our larger organizations, like, not for profits where we've got a number of different managers. Like we've got a not for profit that's a multi site church, and they've got a number of different managers across lots of different locations. And, there's things going on. They're trying to do their thing. They've got, important things they're managing people. There's vacations, all the other things, that are taking up their time. But we have a really quick turnaround for our close for them. And so we really need to have everything real time. So all the approvals have to be real time. And with them, we can have a couple of different flavors of approvals. It could be expense reimbursements, where we have no way of knowing that this expense actually happened until we get that expense reimbursement from the employee, and then it gets approved by the manager, right? And so that if that's coming in late, we've already issued the statements, and now we've got this extra bit of transaction that we didn't know anything about. And then we've also got uh, you know uh, company credit cards where they've got approval processes in place because they need the manager to actually like acknowledge that this went through their company credit card and make sure that it's okay and approve it. That we would know it has already happened because it's gone through the company credit card. um, but we want to also make sure that the managers are taking the time to acknowledge things real time, just in case we've got any funky business going on, that we can stop that right away. um, the so and then there's bills that are coming in from vendors and what have you that are approved more at a higher level, so that with our the people that we're meeting with on a regular basis, so there's a little bit easier to deal with. But we kind of have three different things that are going on with this one organization and with a lot of our not-for-profits. And so we've had to, once we got the softwares in place, because there was a lot of learning curve for everybody, just getting the processes and softwares in place, because before everything was paper. So they would come and bring an expense reimbursement with all the documents and receipts and everything, and then somebody would have to type that all into Sage 50 before they converted over to QuickBooks, and it was just super time consuming, and it would delay the month ends and the year ends. But essentially, now we have to think of this from a real time perspective. So we're sending out follow-ups on a regular basis. We're using the applications wherever possible to send reminders on recurring basis, so that the software is actually doing the nagging as much as possible to remind people. And then we've got some communication tools where we're just sending out here's all the here's the bad culprits for the week messages, just to kind of get people on track, so that they understand, hey, there's something that I got to deal with, and other people can kind of bump them as well throughout the organization. Hey, it looks like you got something to deal with. To get them on track, because otherwise we're just spending too much time chasing people. So
Yeah.
um yeah, the
Well,
approvals.
related to that, I mean,
Yeah.
there's the getting of the approval, and then there's the proving it in the future. So I don't know if
Yeah.
you've had examples of like, I mean, the importance of getting the approval you've kind of spoken to already, but like, have you
Yeah.
had a chance where it's like, no, I don't remember approving that, and it's like, well, yeah, we talked about it. So it's like, how do you create that audit
Yeah,
trail so that 3 months from now or year end close, it's like, no, we have an audit that proves all this.
for sure. I mean, um so there's a couple of ways. Obviously we use approval max with a lot of our clients as well. So just with the way that approval max works, when somebody approves the transaction in approval max, it'll send that into QuickBooks or Zero, and then at the transaction level you can not only see the attachment but also the approval audit, which is awesome. And so for our clients that have audits, say, like, the auditors love it. We just give them access and they can see what they need to see, and that's awesome. If it's gone through email, then we've got that as a backup. It's obviously a lot more manual, so it's way easier to use Approval Max to get those approvals documented in at the transaction level, rather than having to like upload approval
Yeah.
documentation. And then also, for some of our smaller clients, like, we will avoid having the approval at the before it goes into the books level, and have it at the payment level. So if they've got, say, bills from vendors and it's a smaller organization, rather than approving the bill and then approving the payment for the bill later, we use Pluto for a lot of our clients for our bill payments. What happens, we have an approval process set up in Pluto where we set up the AP run. It goes to the client, and then they can see the backup document at the pay run level, and they can basically, when they're approving, they're approving that bill and the payment at the same time. And that's also got an audit history to it as well. So depending on the flavor, the size of the company, what's going on, we've got a bunch of different ways to do that. Because yeah, I don't want to have a conversation with with a client where we're debating whether it was approved or not and it was paid. You know what I mean? That's not fun.
Right.
a fun conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it as with any tool, right? It creates some process. Like there's a thing that the client is now expected to
Hmm.
do, but by creating those constraints, those rails, like what have you found for clients, right? When they're using Approval Max and before they were shooting emails and saying, yeah, that everything's
Yeah.
fine, or I got to jump on a plane, so I'll text you that it's okay.
Yeah.
It's sort of the one with the constraints and one platform versus kind of hodgepodge.
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, it was a mess, right? And if it's going through email too, um, depending on if they're approving right away and we know how much is in the bank account and they're approving right away, we know how much it needs to go out. It's easy for us to say, yes, there's enough cash to pay for that AP run and to make sure we've got enough cash for payroll and everything else that needs to come out in the next little bit before some more revenue comes in. But if there's delays, then it's like a moving target. And so, that's why we prefer to be able to keep it in a system where it's a little bit more automated and they can see the total balance of what that's going to do. We can provide them the bank balance at the same time and just get her done at the same time. So, I mean, often in our weekly meetings or our biweekly meetings with our clients, we're doing the AP run and we're showing them, here's what we're going to pay. Like, here's what, and let them see the whole picture, so that they're not just saying yes to everything without having understanding the impact or, if we're looking at the AP aging and they can take a look to see, okay, some of these are actually quite late and they're chasing us a lot, so we need to clear these up. So it's just, I find it easier to be able to show them visually the data in front of them, than try to do this back and forth in email.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think to kind of combine the two, like how have you seen being able to get answers back about transactions and getting receipt documentation help to speed approvals? And on the flip side, how have you seen approvals sort of make it really easy to explain transactions and be able to close faster? Because it seems like the two, because people frequently ask, like, why are you guys doing this webinar together? And it's like,
Actually,
actually, it does make sense.
it does make sense. There's a lot of crossover, right? Like there's, um, and like I said before, there can be approval steps required before we get the documents into the books, and then there can be approval steps after, right? But at the end of the day, the documentation is absolutely important for us as accountants and bookkeepers to make sure that we've got the proof of what these transactions are in the books. We got to get them in as quickly as possible, and we also need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to prevent fraud, right? Because we are the ones that are going to catch it if anybody's going to catch it. So, having mechanisms to make it easy for us to flow through the volume of like if you think of it from this perspective, imagine like one bookkeeper or accountant in any firm, how many thousands of transactions they're going to see on a monthly basis. It's a bit boggling. Like not every when I talk about accounting brains, not every brain out there is going to be able to handle the volume of transactions and all the nuances and detail. We need to make it easy, for them to just plow through that without having to get stuck at places, get stuck when they're bookkeeping and they don't have the documentation, get stuck, oh, where's this sitting? Oh, it's still sitting in approval, but and it just throwing them off their flow. Um, if we can just get through that bookkeeping quickly, we can all then take more time at the review level, at checking things, at making sure that everything's making sense, at providing recommendations. And so, yeah, they are your two applications are so intertwined, right? Because they're helping us to get those really super key, bits of information that we need in order to do our job, right? We just get completely stopped if we don't have the documentation or we don't have the approvals.
Right. That makes sense. Obviously, open to any questions if folks have them as we go. But yeah, kind of a takeaway at the end. How can folks that are on get a win and even better a quick win, right? What are things that
Mhm.
you would recommend? It could be
For
tools, but
sure.
also just could be a little unlock of process.
Yeah, I mean, I think, also a couple of things. I think it's really important to get to know your clients so that you understand, how to best work with them. I think it is a little erroneous to think that we can operate the exact same way in the same processes with all of our clients, even if they were all in the same industry. So like we work with clients across lots of different industries, but even if I, decided to work, just with hairdressers, like they're all going to be different in how they work, right? And so getting to know your clients and figuring out what is the path of least resistance for you to get what you need from them on a regular basis to ease the frustration so that you can deliver higher value, I think is the first thing. Make sure you're setting up the relationship properly so that they understand the importance of getting everything to you correct and on time. I think a lot of times we forget how little clients understand about accounting. And so being able to spend the time with them at the start of the engagement to gauge what is their fin literacy level, and do they understand their numbers, do they understand how accounting works, do they understand accounting principles and rules, do they understand how that relates to how they are behaving on a day-to-day basis. They've always been told some kind of weird myth from somebody, or they've read something this somewhere. They all somehow believe that there's a way for us to like figure out how to get around tax paying, but that's not true for anybody. But anyhow, I get that question all the time. How can I pay less tax? I don't know. Make less revenue. Like, what do you want from me?
Probably not the answer that anyone wants.
No.
Yeah.
I say to them, if you pay more tax, that's worth celebrating because that means
Right.
your business is doing better. But anyhow, just doing what you need to do to build up their relationship at the start so that you understand them, they understand you, they understand the importance of all the work that you're doing. They have a better understanding of why you have to do it, so that you might have to tell them 7 times, right? It's a learning process for everybody, but it makes it a lot easier for you to be able to reinforce and hold them accountable later, to following the process. And now, when it comes to rolling out new applications, so that's the first thing. Just make sure you're knowing your clients very well. And if you haven't done something in your sales process or your onboarding process to spend that time and set up the relationship properly, then maybe just work through your talk tracks and your what you're doing at the start of your engagements to get on the right footing there. The second piece is then look at your tech stack. Okay, so um, both of these applications are awesome and they save us scads of time in labor. So the cost benefit is just like it's impossible to calculate, but it's immense. Okay, for us, the amount of time that we would otherwise be chasing clients for things, and chasing numerous people for approvals. If we didn't have Approval Max as an option for one of our clients, I'm sure they would still be doing everything in pen and paper or in paper, and that is just impossible for us to manage as a cloud accounting remote firm. So we would likely not have even been able to take them on as a client. So it's that's huge value that these two applications are providing. If you haven't used them before, I recommend testing them out, demoing them, and I say this to everybody who's looking at trying a new application out with your clients, because it can seem a little bit daunting if you're used to specific apps and you haven't thrown a lot of new apps out at your clients. Is to find a client that you really like and say, hey, I'm interested in trying out this application. I thought this might be really helpful for you. I'm still new to it. You're going to be new to it. Are you happy to just walk through this process with me and see how it goes and see if this can add value? And you don't have to be an expert and it doesn't have to be perfect, but you've set it up so that it's like, hey, let's test it out. I've done that many times with my clients. With obviously, pick one that's going to be a little bit more forgiving if something goes a little bit bumpy along the way, if you've messed something up or whatever. But and lean on Approval Max and Uncat. I'm sure they'd be happy to get on a demo with you and your client and walk through how the application works and answer any questions. And then test it out, see how it goes, and then you can reach out to the next clients, and see how that might make their lives better. When some of my clients, just being able to speak to, hey, I've got this other client that started using this application. This is what we're able to achieve, and I think it's going to solve a lot of problems for you. Should we give this a go? They're usually really happy to give it a go. I think our clients generally have less app fatigue than I think our team does sometimes. But at the end of the day, if there's anything we can do to save them time and get rid of some of the pains in their day to day, then they're usually quite willing to jump on board with that.
Yeah.
And it just, if at the end of the day, like any minute that we spend with them dealing with accounting and bookkeeping questions or issues is pulling them away from sales. And so as much as we can clear up their time so they can focus on growing their business, I think is is the right approach, I think, to really helping them with their businesses, because we don't want to clog up their time. We want to be respectful of their time, and also, they've got a lot of stuff going on. Like just like us as business owners, we've got a lot of emails and communications and things going on all the time. Business owners are very busy all the time too. So anything we can do to
Right.
make their time, I think if you're trying to sell the application because it's going to make your life easier, it's going to be a harder sell. But if you can sell it that it's going to make their life easier, it's going to be an easier sell. I guess is my point there.
Yeah. A little empathy goes a long way.
A little
Um,
empathy goes a long way. Yeah.
I'll add briefly, just from our experience having launched Uncat 5, 6 years ago, a few things we've learned along the way. For the vast majority, and to Helena's point, not all, but for the vast majority of clients, asking them for information weekly, way better than
Yeah.
asking monthly. And I came to this whole thing from the client perspective because I was the client. Um, and when it was monthly for me, I'd be like, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I've been on a plane 7 times. I don't know what I bought at that airport, and I don't know why I did it. Right. And so then it's like, well, if I don't know why, then the bookkeeper or the fractional CFO didn't know why either. But if they
Yeah.
asked me weekly, I'd be like, oh, well, yeah, I was just in Chicago. I was just in California. This is what I did. So a weekly cadence has made a big difference for us and for a lot of the firms we work with.
Mhm.
Um, Two, spreadsheets are super awesome, right? It's one of the all-time killer apps of software. They're not super great at syncing data historically. They're not
No.
super great at user permissioning and provisioning. And so that's why having something in a web app, of course, there's lots of agents and stuff, and we can talk about AI for a minute too if we want to, but having it in a web app for us, huge unlock versus trying to chase clients with spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are useful for 100 other things. They're just not particularly great for this use case. I would submit for either use case. I don't think they're great for doing approvals, and I don't think they're great for getting information about transactions. It's just really, really difficult to manage them from the client perspective, as Helena emphasized, as well as from the bookkeeper or accountant perspective. Um, a huge unlock for us that we learned actually very quickly. We launched our application during the pandemic, and it was like clients could come and sign in, and they had terrible troubles signing in because it involved creating a user account with an email and a password. And a lot of them were like, I already have like 15 other accounts with different apps, and I can't remember what password I used. And I'm having trouble resetting the password because I can't remember which of my emails I used. And it's like,
Jeez.
oh my gosh, like this is impossible. Like we can't help you because we don't know your emails, right? So what the big difference there was using a magic link, right? Just making it super easy for the client and for the accountant to just click and have instant access to the platform where they make updates. This was not something we invented, by the way. Like Slack and other big companies have been using it for years, but it's something that made a huge difference in adoption and usage of our
Hmm.
software and lots of other softwares that we've seen is just making it dead simple for, like you said, for the user to get in and out and then go back to building their business, focus on
Yeah.
sales. So a one-click link to get in and answer questions versus having to remember a password, way better. I certainly like it as a user. Like I'm like, I don't have to
Hmm.
worry about like, I wonder which weird password I use this time. Like not gonna work.
Does
Um,
it end with 1, 2, 3 exclamation mark?
yeah, exactly right. Like every other person's password. Um, we observe just a little small, right? We figure this stuff out over time. Behavioral hack is that we used to remind clients based on the number of to-dos they had. So if there were 10 transactions, we'd say, hey, there are 10 transactions that need your attention. It turns out that list is useful to accountants and bookkeepers because it gives them a sense of workload. What am I
Yeah.
in for here? The client is the opposite. They're like, oh no, like it looks like a lot of work. What the client is motivated by is that it's their money.
The dollar
So
amount.
the reminders to clients now says you have $1,500 worth of transactions that needs your attention. And it's like, oh yeah, that's now I'm locked in. I want to find out what that $1,500 for. Maybe some of it I can claw back. Maybe I can identify it. So that's a useful thing because it's relevant to your point to the client, not from my
Hmm.
perspective as the accountant. And the last thing, and you already talked about, is like some clients, right? And I'm of this generation. I'm email. I'm on top of my email pretty consistently. There's lots of folks in different types of businesses, right? If you're a chef, you're probably not checking email all day. But
No.
if you want to cut through the clutter and get through to a manufacturing floor or a chef or folks that are out and about, right? Mobile salespeople, et cetera.
Yeah.
Reminding by text message has been a pretty big unlock. I think because most of us are still conditioned to like, oh, a text, I should read it and I should probably respond to it. Whereas
Yeah.
emails are like way more asynchronous and way more optional. So this will evolve over time as communication channels change, but text has been a great way to sort of get those folks' attention to Susan's question, like, hey, when do I tell a client it's just not going to work out because they're
Yep.
not responding? And it's like, well, one thing to try is text to see if that breaks through. Like, are
Yeah.
they just missing emails because they're getting automatically flagged as bulk email? They just never see them. Or are they
Yeah.
just so inundated by sales emails, which are pretty important, that they just aren't seeing reminders related to accounting? So anyway, those are five kind of relatively quick wins to the questions that Andrew provided us with, like how do folks get some quick wins? They're applicable to us on the Uncat side, but I think they're pretty applicable to any
They are.
workflow or tooling that you might choose to implement for your firm.
For sure. It reminds me too. I wanted to share an example of one of my most challenging clients, I think, from a receipt perspective. Um, is a butcher, right? And so, yeah, he's not at a computer all day. When we first started working with him, he didn't have a computer. He still has like a little tablet kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we've got him onto video calls, and that's all fine. But he's sitting there zooming in on his tablet the whole time. But he has like hundreds and hundreds and he's got two shops. He's got hundreds and hundreds of bills every month, right? And so but he's got to review them carefully, make sure that everything actually arrived, make sure there's no credits he needs to chase. And so there's a lot of like work that he has to do at the bill level before we can get them. Um, and we got him like a scan snap so that he could just pop the stuff into scan snap. But it just he would forget which ones he did put in and double like put some through twice, forget to put some through, and it was just not working. And so, another like this is part of the getting to know your client. Like the easiest thing, you could try to keep training him on ScanSnap and keep reiterating the importance of getting this stuff on a regular basis, or come up with an easier solution for him. And so, what we actually do is we have a courier go and to his shop once a week. He puts all the bills that are ready in there in the envelope. It goes away. It gets sent to another team members. They put it through a ScanSnap, and then we get it into the systems we need to. And it was just, it's a small little thing. It takes us, 5 minutes to get the courier going every week. He knows what time it's coming. He's got the envelopes ready there. And then whatever he's got available, he knows that it's coming on that day. So it kind of gives him a deadline in the week as well, as opposed to just whenever he feels like it. And then we've got someone who it takes them, 5 minutes to scan it and then they can get going. And so it might seem like a lot of effort, but like the $40 a month and the 10 minutes a week is a way better solution than the time wasted chasing him and saying and presenting him, his financials with like, oh well, look, your cost of goods sold are really low this week or this month because you haven't sent us anything yet. The
Right.
numbers are completely wrong, right? So that's a one, another hack we had is just trying to find other ways to get the information that you need in
I mean, that's a very bespoke solution and actually reminds me of a lot of stories that come out of the hospitality industry, right?
yeah.
Sort of the Ritz-Carlton approach, if you will, where it's like they'll go overboard for their clients, and then as a result, you get these amazing reviews where it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
they drove 100 miles to bring me my toiletry bag that I accidentally left behind in the room or something, and people are like, wow, that sounds like a great place to stay. They really take care of you. And so,
Yeah.
choosing to use a courier or something like that, it's like, oh, that sounds like a lot. Sounds extreme, but at the same time, right, for a great client. And we've heard too many apocryphal stories at conferences like, oh, they're my biggest client, but I just can't work with them anymore. And it's like, did we try everything? Right? I mean,
Try
it sounds
everything.
like otherwise it could have worked, but
Yeah.
for the communication broke down somehow. But yeah, maybe use a courier or something like that and get it done.
Yeah.
So
I have one of my favorite books right now is called Unreasonable Hospitality. If you
that's
haven't read
great,
it,
isn't it?
I
Yeah.
love that book. I think you actually recommended that book to me, and I've had my whole team read it. And then I'm such a horrible boss. I made everybody do a PowerPoint presentation, well, slides presentation on the things that they wanted to implement, some ideas that they had, and it was great. And we had like a little cohort of team that was just like whipping through all the recommendations, and it got us excited about thinking about how we can be in better service to our clients, because we forget that we own services companies and we forget that what we're doing is services at the end of the day. And in the book they really talk about beyond services is this hospitality kind of approach to it. So
I love
if you're
it.
looking for some, you know ways to get the creative juices going, that book is really, really inspiring.
It's a great read, and if you like the audio visual format, then you can watch the FX series The Bear because that's based on that author's writing, and he's one of the producers.
Oh, I didn't
So
know that. Okay.
yeah, it's a cool tie-in. So
Yeah. And if you and if sitting down and reading a book is not your thing, the audio book is really good as well.
yeah,
So
no, it's a fascinating story. Yeah, I love that book as well. Well, awesome. I think we're about wrapped. Obviously, if there's any questions, we're happy to answer them here toward the end. Otherwise, Andrew's posted some links for you, so feel free to connect with us through
oh,
our websites, through
we need our
LinkedIn,
final poll as well. Let's get that final poll up.
by email. Yes, and we may have a quick final poll, which you can just express interest in learning more. And we're more than happy to follow up. You can grab time with us for more of a tech demo to check out the software if you want. We're happy to set you up with a free trial of either Approval Max or Uncat or both.
Mm-hmm. And somebody was asking about the book title, Janine. So that was Unreasonable Hospitality. And his name is Will, starts with a G. I can't remember his surname. Do you remember?
Not off the top, I have to look it
Okay,
up.
sorry, but Unreasonable Hospitality. I think it's the only one called that. It's very good.
Yeah,
Yellow page, yellow
yellow
cover
cover.
to it.
That's right.
Yeah. Um, I think that's all the tips I have for today. I hope this has been helpful for everybody. But I guess the parting, words really just there are ways to make it easier for sure. Sometimes thinking outside the box, but the easiest step is really just to look at where you can leverage technology to help make your life easier. I was just on another call before, was talking to other accountants, and one of the concerns that people came up about was about the costs. Okay, it's another software fee, and I shared that when we started using HubDoc back in the days, years and years and years ago, we knew that was going to save us so much time with our clients to be able to easily get documents from our clients electronically. And we just paid for it for our clients because we knew that the $23 a month was going to be saving us at least $23 in labor every month. And then for every new
Oh,
client that came on, we started charging them. I can tell you we did not lose money on that in that situation, because every client that we put on HubDoc was like, oh my God, this is so much easier. Thank you so much. They stayed with us for a long time. When we did our price increases, they were happy to take the price increases. I know that we made it back like many times over at the end of the day. And so, I think wherever you can leverage the technology to help make your life better and your client's life better is going to have like huge impact for that relationship with that client, and what you're able to do to support them at the end of the day. Yeah.
100%. Just checking. Any other questions? Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Janine.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks for joining us
everybody.
today.
Yeah. Thank you all. Helena, great to see you again. Next time
Lovely to see you too.
we'll swap cookies. That'll be our unreasonable hospitality. It'll be like I'm shipping you a box of cookies from Tennessee. Worth it. Moon pies maybe from Tennessee. You can send
I
me a
would
few
love that.
cookies.
I would love that. Thank
Okay,
you. I love sweets.
it's a fair trade.
Fair trade. Fair
We
trade.
can make that
Awesome.
happen.
Well,
Good
enjoy
enough.
the rest of your summers, everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you,
Sounds
Andrew,
good.
for organizing.
Yeah. See you, everybody. Yeah, thanks, Andrew.